Hey, thanks for joining again. I know I just recorded a podcast yesterday. I felt like it was a little bit digressive and all over the place, but I'm thinking a lot about these things. There was just the ceasefire for see how long that lasts in Iran. I got some personal stuff going on. It's also the end of the Passover holiday. I should not be recording anything today and tomorrow, but here I am making independent decisions. Okay. So this podcast is based again on my latest Substack post. If you're probably used to the drill by now, at the Thatcher Report, your superpower is up for grabs. Being politically homeless is like that Daft Punk song. It makes you harder, better, faster, stronger. Great song. So I talked to a really good friend who's known me a very long time the other day. And talking to him kind of gave me a space to think a little bit about this big political evolution that I've been having since October 7th, and many people have been having for all different types of reasons over the past couple of years. So, from my perspective, from the American Jewish perspective, 2024 was a watershed year. Almost every college campus in America erupted into profound anti Jewish bigotry. This was abetted by faculty members, administrators, most media outlets who kind of poo pooed it as kind of just rabble rouser college, idealistic college students. Most left wing politicians supported them, most celebrities, most arts institutions. Meanwhile, outside of college campuses, and I went to Columbia University twice to counter protest the protesters, just in the streets here in Brooklyn. I don't know what it was like where you are, but out here in Brooklyn, it was pretty crazy. You had essentially Americans putting on keffiyehs, staging really wild protests with graffitis, arrests, all types of angry stuff just around the corner from me over and over again. And these were not peaceful demonstrations for peace like you would think, like other protests and rallies I've been to since I was a teenager. No, this was a flood for Brooklyn. That's what the little flyer said everywhere. That's what these kids wrapped in, and I say kids dismissively, that's what these adults wrapped in keffiyehs and queer keffiyehs and all types of crazy stuff that you would never see in the Middle East. They were for flooding Brooklyn. That's the exact same term, flood, that Hamas used for their invasion of Israel. They called it the Al Aqsa flood. And Al Aqsa is basically a term for Jerusalem. So what you saw, it seems small, but it's really big, is that left wing progressive, not like just centrist left wings. This is definitely more in the far left, but they were everywhere. It wasn't like five guys. They were adopting the actual language of terrorists in Israel and Gaza who burned, maimed, raped, and murdered people, right? That's pretty wild. That's, again, as I was saying yesterday, this is not the civil rights movement with nonviolent civil disobedience like from Gandhi or from Martin Luther King Jr. These are actual American citizens using the language of terrorists who kill Americans, right? One afternoon, you might know this story if you've been listening for a while, but if you're new to this, this is a true story. One afternoon in 2024, I was running some errands on Flatbush Avenue, which is a busy main artery in Brooklyn, kind of near downtown Brooklyn. All of a sudden, like a mob appeared, and not a mob is a strong word. A march just appeared out of nowhere in the streets. All these people wrapped up in keffiyehs and various signs and people on bicycles, but they were marching down the street. It was clearly illegal. It shut down traffic. It was very surprising. And I saw what was happening. I was doing my errands. I was from my spot on the sidewalk. I just gave the thumbs down sign. I didn't say anything. I didn't have a sign or anything. I was just going about my day. I just gave the thumbs down sign and I held it there. I'm an American, right? I have free speech rights. I think it's amazing that I can do it. So I did it. Within a few minutes, first a woman yelled out at me, I'm an example of white male privilege. I don't, I think she was pretty white, not male, I guess, but I'm not sure what that means in this context. Um, couldn't a black person put a thumbs down? Couldn't a Palestinian person put a thumbs down? I don't know. I was surrounded. There are a lot of black people around me on the sidewalk. Was that black male privilege that they're on the sidewalk? I don't know how that makes any sense. And then, but more frighteningly, a bunch of guys came up to me and were screaming because one guy was screaming at me that I was a Nazi for not supporting Palestine, um, stuff like that. I didn't say a word. I was very, very quiet. I didn't want to provoke anybody. I didn't want to get into a political argument. I just wanted to express my feelings about their expressions. Was a thumbs down. It's negative, but it was respectful. I wasn't like going out into the street to block them or anything. I was away from them on the sidewalk. They were yelling at me. It was pretty scary. My heart was going like a jackhammer. I really made sure to have a wall near my back, but not at my back, so that they couldn't encircle me and beat the shit out of me. And I wasn't gonna die, I don't think, but it was pretty violent seeming. It was on the cusp of violence, and I think I did a good job of not initiating any violence, but I also stood my ground. I'm not going to let people trample on my rights. But that kind of changed something for me. I could no longer just say, oh, these are just a bunch of extremists within the left wing movement. I really feel like the larger left wing movement has been incubating this kind of really dramatic hatred. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, on the phone the other day with my old friend, he's like, no, that's not true. You've been on a collision course with liberal thinking for a long time before then. And he's right. He's right. And this is kind of that story. And where I'm going to go in this discussion is I'm going to tell you about the break, how I made the shift, but also what the superpower it gives you. And it's not just me, it's you, it's people reading the free press, it's people reading Substacks, it's people, I don't use social media like Instagram, but I'm sure it's a lot of people there. It's very empowering to break free of a prior framework that doesn't really, in my mind, doesn't really make any sense, doesn't really work, doesn't have as much, it's not an effective tool anymore. So you get the superpower, and the superpower therefore enables you to see things really clearly, like X-ray vision. And we'll talk about what those things are. But for right now, as my kind of preamble, is how did I get there? You know that I've been using the evolving Jewish identities as an identification with Israel. As Michael Lawrence said the other day in Substack, Israel is a metonym for Judaism, right? It's like a symbolic. It's like a word that or a place that stands for the whole thing for Judaism. You could use that for almost any country in any culture, Japan or something. But Israel is that for Judaism. And that's given me a tool to kind of analyze the failings of liberal culture in America. And reading the news, I see that that same failed liberal thinking is all over Europe, in Australia, and in Canada. There's a lot of violent attacks, a lot of shootings at synagogues in Canada. It's tolerated by the government. They say it's bad and they want to defeat anti-Semitism, but they don't do anything about it. Of course, you've had the army deployed in Belgium, not police, army, to protect synagogues. That's not a good sign. And in Australia, their answer to the Bondi Beach massacre is to clamp down on gun rights for like farmers. It's really dumb. They're not just going to say no Muslims. We'll get to that in a minute, but the Muslims can't have the guns. Not a farmer on some ranch somewhere or whatever they call it in Australia. That he's not the problem. But they won't name it. It's not working. This liberal culture isn't working as it encounters Islam. It just doesn't work anymore. But it doesn't work anymore for a lot of things, but that's one of them. So this kind of Israeliness that has transformed Jewish identity is new. Israel is new as a current state since 1948, but we really haven't been going there in large numbers until the 1990s. And now American Jews are a little bit more like other immigrant groups like Koreans or Mexicans. We have a place to go back to and recharge. And and visit relatives or whatever. And prior to that, our only option was to go to a Holocaust museum. Obviously, there's synagogue and studying and stuff like that. But for non-religious Jews, non-observant Jews, or Jews who have no literacy with Hebrew, that's kind of hard to do, go to synagogue. But they can go to a Holocaust museum. Those are your options. So now that we have Israel and it's impacted Judaism, it's done a few things. One of them is that it's splintered the Jewish community, but not by as much as you think. And then if you read the New York Times, they mostly give coverage to far left-wing Jewish progressives who are anti-Israel and pro-Mamdani and all this kind of stuff. That's actually a very, very small minority. It's like 80% of the Jewish world, perhaps more, is basically kind of semi-Israeli at this point. Doesn't mean they're not loyal citizens. It doesn't mean that they don't vote and care about the countries they lived in for generations. It just means that they're kind of like a Korean or a Mexican, where they can go back to Korea or Mexico and kind of recharge. But now we can do that for Israel, right? And that's mainstream. Most Jews feel that way. But the problem is that while that kind of happened for Jewish people, and it's really lovely and it's fun to talk about our good companions now, like Koreans and Mexicans or Irish or Italians, it's good company to keep. We're now seeing that the general liberal worldview, which liberals will tell you is mandatory, or you're a racist, or you're a fascist, or some other terrible thing. You're not allowed to not have the liberal worldview. That's part of the liberal totalitarianism. You have to embrace it. There are no options. They're always right, because there's this big struggle. And if you're not on the right side of the struggle, you're an oppressor. You're the problem, or you're just stupid. Those are your choices. In the general liberal worldview, which is mandatory, they have decided how to pick winners and losers, heroes and villains in the Middle East. Now, the Middle East has been having wars since the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1919 by the British. Every couple of years, or every 10 years, it's usually something like that. But within a decade, every decade, there's a couple of wars, mostly against Israel. That's kind of the history. There were a lot of other wars, right? Iraq, Iran, which didn't yield in any real changes. Iraq took over Kuwait. There was the US war in Iraq. But most of the wars are not like between Algeria and Tunisia or something. It's mostly Muslim Arabs attacking Israel over and over and over and over and over again. That's kind of the big picture. And the liberal worldview, they have picked who to root for by looking through the lens of the American civil rights movement. So this Ta-Nehisi Coates, I probably don't pronounce his name correctly, and I that's not intentional. I struggle with it. But Ta-Nehisi Coates is a really good American Black writer. He writes great stuff. I read, now of course I didn't prepare this. I'm just speaking extemporaneously, but Between the World and Me, I think is his memoirs, like a letter to his son. It's beautiful. It's a really powerful book. I really enjoyed it. I recommend people read it. He's great. He's a really smart, literate guy. He wrote a book a year ago or a year and a half ago, that he went to Israel for like 7 days or 9 days or something, popped around the West Bank. And then he basically wrote a book with these claims that there's this kind of global Jim Crow, like the Jim Crow from America in the 1950s, or from the 1860s to the 1950s, 1960s, about 100 years of that. That's what's happening in Israel. Now, that's preposterous, and I think it's quite a dangerous thought, as you'll hear later. It doesn't make any sense in the Middle East. Most of the Middle East is Muslim and Arab, and then there's obviously the Persians and the Iranians that are a big focus these past month or two, but it's like 400 million Muslim Arabs, and then they're usually pitted against rather chill, small minority groups. Now, the Jews get a lot of attention, but there's not a lot of them, like 7 million, 8 million. There are Christians, Druze, Kurds, Yazidis, Berbers, other groups I don't even know about. There's all the ethnic groups in Iran, the Balukis and so forth, but there's all these little small groups. They don't have a lot of power, but they get like crushed by Islam. In any event, Doesn't matter to Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's zooms in really, really tiny into like the West Bank, and he comes up with a whole paradigm that, that's segregation. That's Jim Crow. So it's wrong. It's factually wrong to use that framework, but it's very popular. And one reason how it's factually wrong is, okay, so let's say you're in Israel, West Bank. Now go a little bit further south. Go to like Mali, Sudan. Go a little over to Nigeria, where you have Black Muslims massacring Black Christians. Okay, so what's the global Jim Crow framework? How does that help you out of that one? It's just so dumb. So, but despite how dumb it is to use the American Civil Rights Movement for the Middle East, they don't use that for Ukraine and Russia. They don't use that for Venezuela. They don't use it for Cuba. They don't use it for China, but for some reason they use it for Israel. It's really weird. And I've talked a lot about why it happens. I'm not going to go into that now, but despite how inane it is, and even a really smart guy like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's like, I'm sure it could like, spin circles around me, how smart he is. And even somebody like him uses these terms. It's now required in the Democratic Party to believe in this. Like this is scripture for them. It's Jim Crow. It's in Israel. That's why even a centrist like Gavin Newsom used the term apartheid in a podcast. It's apartheid, Jim Crow. It's like this kind of conflation of stuff, but it's all kind of the same things, like about segregation. And he later walked it back, kind of, but you can't really unring that bell when the centrist, sort of the party leader right now, uses it. You can't really unhear it. It's like you can't say like a racist slur. You can't say the N-word and be like, "Whoop, just kidding. I didn't mean to say that." It's like you said it. It's out there. So this, and there, I'm sort of tempted to go into a long digression about why these smart people think of it as segregation, because the West Bank is occupied by a mixture of the IDF and the Palestinian Authority. These people don't have sovereignty. That's true. They're not voting for anybody. Why aren't they voting for anybody? Well, the Palestinian Authority hasn't had elections in 20 years. That has nothing to do with Israel. That's a decision by them. But it's super complicated. Like, why are they under military control by the IDF and the regions the IDF controls? And obviously, the IDF goes into the Palestinian areas when it wants to. They're in this situation because they lost a whole bunch of wars. And the last one they lost was 1967, and they're kind of in this in between state of this kind of permanent refugee status because the UN enforces that. It's the only place in the world where you have multi-generational refugees. Usually a refugee is for like the time of the fighting. They go to some new place and then they get citizenship, or they work, or they have kids, or they kind of merge into that new country, or they move around, or they come back if the fighting ends. Quote unquote Palestine, which is not actually a country, but people on the left say it is, they're kind of in this weird limbo because the UN keeps it going, UNRWA, and because there's never been a diplomatic or a military solution, either one, for their sovereignty, right? There's Oslo Accords. The Palestinian leadership by Yasser Arafat said no many, many times, despite many, many attempts by different American presidents and by different Israeli prime ministers. So it's complicated. It's not Jim Crow. It's not segregation. It's not the Palestinians were slaves and then they were kind of stuck there, and now they just have not slavery anymore, but like segregation. And they can't go to certain hotels or drink water fountains or go to certain schools. That's not what it is. They have their own villages. They have their own lives. Their lives are not like middle-class American lives, but they're very similar to the lives in Jordan and Egypt and so on. Okay. So Gavin Newsom is saying these terms. You obviously have public intellectuals like Ta-Nehisi Coates has been saying these terms for a while. What happens now when you look at the world as a global Jim Crow, or you look at the Middle East as within the Jim Crow framework, is that it means that liberal Americans, like nice liberal Americans who don't want racism, who want to try to combat poverty, who want good things, like they have it's vague, it's high level, but they want good stuff. They want a clean environment, stuff. They want good things, right? They now partner with illiberal Muslims because they consider all Muslims like beleaguered black Southerners in the 1950s. It's crazy, but that's how it is. And therefore, the Israelis are the whites, and so on and so forth, even though that's not true. And it's totally different. It's an irredentist military conflict, like in Northern Ireland, kind of, sort of. It's more like Northern Ireland than it is the Deep South in 1950. But so liberals, but it doesn't matter. This is what's happening. Liberals in America join forces with illiberal Muslims. That's why you see Queers for Palestine, stuff like that is just a stark example. And these liberal Americans don't ask a lot of questions when illiberal Muslims slip into our country alongside hardworking, normal Muslims, right? There's lots and lots of immigration now from Muslim countries, a lot of them in Central Asia and in the Middle East, to America. There's much more to Europe, to Australia, and places like that. But now there's a lot more. That's like the kind of the new immigrant group or Muslims. You see it all over Brooklyn. There's, Pakistan, all different types of countries, Uzbekistan, but certainly also from the Arab world and Iran and places like that to a certain degree. And most of them are, just trying to make a buck and live lives just like I am. But some of them are illiberal and hate the West. And it sounds like I'm hair splitting, and it's kind of discriminatory. Like I'm saying there's some good ones and some bad ones. Well, that kind of sensitivity fades when you're murdered by a liberal Muslim. And since 9/11 in this country, we've had between 19 to 23 fatal attacks by Muslims, right? And I listed out in the Substack. Obviously, 9/11 kicks it off. There were a handful before. And then you just look at the list. It's like, roughly averages out to like almost one a year of fatalities. 14. There was the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida, 49 fatalities. And then people say Queers for Palestine. That's a head scratcher. There was the firebombing in Boulder, Colorado, the shooting outside the Jewish Museum in D.C., the New Orleans New Year's Truck Day attack, if you remember that, from January 1st, 2025. This is all perpetrated by the same group, the same demographic, which are violent liberal Muslims, right? Now, just to be fair, during the same time period, there's roughly the same amount of fatalities from far right-wing white male shooters and killers, right? Domestic white terrorists. Okay. It's roughly, not 9/11 is a huge exception. But then if you go further back to Oklahoma City, these are the two bad groups right now, are Muslim terrorists and far right-wing killers. Liberals don't say both groups are bad, right? For some reason, Muslims get a pass, like the guy who was mourning for his dead Hezbollah family members when he tried to blow up a synagogue in Michigan. And even just by talking about this, if a more liberal person was listening to this, they might be cringing this entire time because it sounds like I'm an Islamophobe for noting the religion of the perpetrators of violence. Not all of these people are immigrants. Some of them have been here a little bit longer. A lot of them are lone wolf. They're kind of self-radicalized, but they're working within a larger Islamic context. It's not coming from nowhere, right? There are mosques. They're being supported abroad and on social media challenges and domestically. I think a lot of average Muslims are obviously not like this at all, but they're kind of like, oh, I kind of get the framework here, but this guy's taking it way too far. But remember, Islam is totalitarian. If you're not Muslim, you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to be Muslim, right? Christians have the same worldview, but they stopped being totalitarian about it at a certain point in history. Jews have never had that worldview, as far as I can tell. We're just kind of happy being a little minority and following our rules and feeling that following those rules makes us close to God. It's really awesome. That's how we say we're chosen, because we're chosen to follow all these rules. Other people can follow them too if they want. And that gives us a very intimate relationship with God, and it feels really good. And it feels like a moral way to live. Other people are welcome to do it. Other people don't have to do it. It's fine. People do whatever they want, but that's like the whole chosenness thing. But it's it's problematic that it's a problem to identify the perpetrators of violence. So, anyways, I got off the phone with my friend and thanked him for this opportunity to reflect on the evolution. And it just made me thankful of his friendship. You know, good friends act as landmarks, wayfinders, anchors, safe havens. I can only hope I can reciprocate for him if he needs that at some point in the future. So he gave me the space to kind of reevaluate this evolution where you're pivoting away from liberal frameworks. And what lessons have I learned since then? And they really came into play last night with the surprise ceasefire, right? After Trump's really wild posts about eliminating a civilization, really strong language from an American president. It's never happened before. Using the F word, it's never happened before. But then guess what? We didn't eliminate any civilizations. So I feel like that's obvious. That was obvious from the start. And I've learned some lessons. So for what it's worth, I'm not alone in this. A lot of other American Jews have been saying this for a long time. I just came from a particularly deep blue perspective, and it maybe took me a little bit longer, but you know, I've been saying it for a while. And Israeli Americans, obviously. I had a Passover Seder. I drove with my son and a young woman that we were all going to the same Seder, and I was kind of playing Uber driver for this young woman in her early 30s who talked a lot, which is kind of typical of an Israeli. It's very sweet. You feel like a sense of intimacy right away. And she was telling me that she's gay and that she's obviously Israeli and how hard it's been for her among other gay people in America who are discriminated against her because she's Israeli. And it was really poignant. And I just listened. I could, what can you say? All you can do is listen when somebody is hurting. And she was just sort of in shock. She just kept on going over it again, how surprised she was, because it's obviously there's gay communities all over Israel, and they still don't want to die. They don't want to be killed by Muslims either. They want to live and live their lives in peace. And there is no more real left wing anymore in Israel because it's collapsed against Islam, against the Oslo Accords in this specific context, but it's essentially against Islam. My big argument is that the left wing collapses against Islam. I'm sort of hinting at that here. That's kind of the major takeaway. Like the left wing doesn't work anymore. It can't negotiate the relationship with a totalitarian illiberal force. It's good at negotiating liberal forces, meaning like people open to dialogue. Republicans can be liberal in this sense. You can kind of have dialogue, create legislation, kind of agree on civilizational frameworks. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for Islam. And it's a very painful lesson. And I'm sure I'm going to be branded a racist or something for observing this, but it seems like a fair conclusion. And I certainly felt like I was hearing some of those echoes from this young woman. So let's see here. How am I going to kind of cut some corners and get moving along? It's not only Jews who have noticed this disconnect with liberalism and how it's doing the Jim Crow thing and how it's sort of excusing or enabling Islamic violence. Kind of scary. It wasn't just college students protesting at 2024. It was the college professors. It was the administrators as well, or the administrators excused it. A couple of famous ones got fired. Most didn't. Most weren't fired. Maybe, Harvard, Penn. It's like 2 or 3 schools people got fired. Most of them kept their jobs. They make like $1 million a year. They raise tuitions. This is what they do for a living. They were the ones, the administrators, who ignored all the you can't have fat shaming, but you can like scream at the Jewish students and don't let them get to class. That's a good one. The professors, really, the narrative is that the students protesting were following orders. They were the foot soldiers for the faculty. That's how that works. They didn't just come up with the stuff on their own. They don't know anything. They're like 22 years old. Like they don't know about stuff. They're being told what the narratives are, and then they're acting out on it because they're like empowered foot soldiers. Not only Jews have noticed this, it's working class people. they've been of all racial backgrounds. It's not just white working. There's like this image that there's like this racist white guy, Archie Bunker, I guess. But it's most people of color. Again, a term I loathe, but it's a great shorthand. Most of them are working class, right? They've noticed deficiencies in liberal thinking for decades, way longer than this thing I'm talking about. And they've shifted their voting patterns. It's now kind of normal. You just sort of think of a blue collar person as right wing, or liberal people call them Trumpy now, but they were for Bush before, um, and they're not talking. It's not the Middle East that's lighting them up. It's the Democratic Party selling them out for free trade policies that eviscerated manufacturing. And Republicans were part of that too, but then Republicans stopped being a part of it with MAGA. Now, you can say there's nuance, there's hair splitting, there are new free trade agreements, but listen, Trump is doing the tariffs. Democrats don't have an answer for the tariffs. They say they're bad. They say Trump is stupid. They say nasty things, but they don't have like an alternative. They're not like, well, instead of tariffs, which maybe help with reshoring manufacturing, we'll see. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but there's an attempt. It's a policy attempt to reshore manufacturing and to enrich America and to stop subsidized Chinese goods from flooding our markets, which are so distorting. Everybody kind of agrees to that. Democrats say they're for working class people. They generally would say that. They certainly talk about supporting unions, but they don't have any policies that I can see that are an alternative. Bernie Sanders talks about end of NAFTA, but I don't really see policies. They talk about maybe increasing the minimum wage, but when you've eviscerated manufacturing, now you have a giant service economy. You raise minimum wage, that puts small businesses out of business, right? I'm in favor of raising minimum wage. It's complicated. People debate it. There's lots of good thinking saying that it's okay to raise minimum wages, businesses compensate, but it definitely doesn't make things cheaper. Let's just put it that way. And going about the unions, Democrats still to this day, they talk about unions. I worked at a political campaign, Clinton Gore 96, long time ago. If you wanted to print up a flyer or something, it had to be from a union shop and they would put a little union stamp on it. Democrats haven't changed. They have all these rules that's like kosher. Like they have to follow these frameworks from long ago. And they talk a good game about unions, but they're against tariffs. They're in favor of lax migration, right? Lax immigration rules. So that's kind of weird. And meanwhile, union membership has declined for decades and decades and decades in this country. Democrats don't seem to have an answer to that. I don't see how they're kind of reunionizing. I know that there are some vital service SEIU. I know there's some vital unions. I'm obviously stumbling here because I'm not an expert in all the names and the acronyms, and there's the teachers union. But in general, the American industrial heartland is not having a resurgence of unions. And I don't see Democrats doing anything about that. What they've done is create subsidies for the very, very bottom rungs. Democrats are really good at that, right? Republicans are less interested. Democrats like Obamacare, the big thing, I'm on Obamacare. I've been on it since the beginning. I'm sort of an Obamacare expert, unfortunately. But it also expanded Medicaid. So it helps people at the very lowest rungs. And then you have welfare and food stamps and stuff like that. The names change, the acronyms change over the decades, but it's the same idea coming from the New Deal era. And that creates, so we don't have massive favelas in this country. We support really poor people, and those really poor people work, and they have shitty service jobs because we eviscerated manufacturing. So, Democrats can talk a good game about supporting unions, but they are against workers if you look at the policies. Now, this, I can prove it. Look at the Teamsters didn't endorse Kamala Harris in 2024, right? They didn't endorse anybody. Unions have always been very pro-Democrat. You can just tell, as I said before, that working class people, they have the vibes of Republicans. They vote Republican, right? And way before Trump. But the top tier union leaders are Democrats, but except for some of the Teamsters now. But the top tier union guys are hardcore Democrats, but the workers aren't. So the Democrats are pro-union leaders, but against the masses of workers. And don't take my word for it. Just look at the voting patterns. Don't forget about the rhetoric. Forget about everything I'm saying. Just look at how they vote and then come to your own conclusions. So that's all a way of saying that, like working class people, like many other groups, now Jewish groups are becoming unshackled from a particular worldview that doesn't serve them anymore, that's made some really weird decisions about Jim Crow, about gender, other things we'll get to. So we're free. We're free to think new thoughts. It's Passover. It's a holiday of freedom. Let's be free. You can join me. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to eat matzah to be free. So here's a couple of observations. I think it's like 3 or 4 observations that I now have that I didn't have before. The first big one is about Trump. Trump barks way more than he bites. It's really funny that Trump has a very obvious, a constantly repeated playbook. He makes the same move over and over and over again. The guy's been president twice. It's been a decade that he's been the most powerful on and off, and certainly the most famous person in the world. Everybody is paying attention to Trump. You might hate him, you might love him, it's hard to be indifferent. It's a very polarizing guy, but he's very publicly available to evaluate what's happening. But the mainstream media, the people who are kind of our storytellers, right? And we get also the stories from the Academy and from the movies, but we get them from the news as well. They don't understand it. It's not because they're dumb. These are not dumb. These are smart people. It's because they're biased, so much so that they just can't understand how it works. Because you just read all the headlines. It's like, oh, we're going to bomb, end civilization. Let's run 30 articles about how bad it is to end civilizations. There's even stuff from Jewish groups like, hey, of all people, we really don't like it when people talk about ending civilizations. I mean, it's kind of hilarious. It's not fun to talk about genocide, but it's just kind of like, what, really, guys? And when Trump negotiates against anyone, he seeks maximum leverage. That's it. That's the whole story. That's all you have to know. So as I've been learning from other podcasts, don't take him literally, take him seriously. That's the difference. It's so obvious. He's so full of bombast. He does stuff, but he's so full of bombast. This is missed by liberal thinkers, writers, politicians, pundits, academics. Why? Why can't they see this? Again, these are smart people. They can't see it because of this bias. What is the bias? The bias is that they are in a movie. They are the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars. I'm Gen X, so I make a lot of Star Wars references. Thank God Disney bought it, so people still know what I'm talking about in Gen Z. But they think that they're in the Rebel Alliance, like Luke Skywalker, and they're fighting this really big empire. And it's like a battle for their deaths. There was actually of course, Hollywood anointed the best movie of the year, 2025, is One Battle After Another. It's the same story, right? It's these kind of scrappy sort of weathermen against the big bad racist, and they're kind of cuddly and charming, scrappy fighters, and the big bad racist is just obviously bad, and he gets killed at the end. Spoiler alert, Sean Penn, great performance. But it's the same thing. They're not seeing reality because they're telling themselves they're like in a battle for their lives. And actually they're doing well. These people are usually doing pretty well in their lives. And that blocks them, I guess, from appraising reality. So here's the reality of the situation. As far as I can tell from my situation, God knows what my biases are that keep me from other things. But Trump was born on third base. I'm recording this right now from Brooklyn. I'm looking to the Northeast. I'm looking into Queens. He was born on third base. He used all this inherited wealth and privilege to make money, lose money, make money back again. That's what he did for most of his adulthood. He then transferred that to media power, right? I don't watch television really pre-streaming, so I didn't watch The Apprentice, but that worked for him. He made a lot of money from it. He wasn't making as much money in real estate, I guess, but he sort of licensed his name. You know the story. And finally, at the climax, he became the most powerful person on the planet twice. He's really, really good at using leverage, all of his wealth, all of his privilege, all of his connections, all of his benefits that he has. He's good at using that to get what he wants. That's how it works for him. And just look at his family life, right? Yeah, he's been married a bunch of times, but he's seemingly has a good relationship with his wife. He's got a whole bunch of kids. Half of them work for him. They're close. He has grandchildren. Like this guy, he's a billionaire. He's a legit. There was all these narratives during the first administration, like he wasn't really a billionaire, right? Those stories have gone away. The guy's a billionaire in any currency you name. Now, the whole corruption thing, that's a whole different conversation, how he gets there. But the point is, even with corruption, he uses leverage to amass power. He's not stupid. He's not a failure. He is really an expert at gaining power. He is clearly an expert at this, the best. He's the best in the world at gaining power at his level, because he obviously started higher than I did and most people. Now, as a politician, he's still doing the same playbook. He's using the U.S. Armed Forces, all of our wealth, all of our soft and hard powers to wield a very, very big stick, like from the Roosevelt era. It's the biggest stick in the world is in America. And like a lot of liberals like Biden and Obama and maybe Clinton, they kind of diminished the stick. I know this is getting phallic very quickly, but they kind of diminished it. They kind of feel bad about it. They don't really want to wield it. They want to have like lots of conversations about it and like, let's talk about our feelings. Not Trump. He's like, I got a really big stick. And it's the biggest stick. Nobody else has a bigger stick. And I'm going to beat you until I get what I want. So I can either beat you or you can just give me what I want. That's how he negotiates every single time. I don't understand why journalists can't understand this. It's so clear. Mostly, he doesn't even pick up the stick. He just points at it or he talks about it on social media. Rarely does he pick up the stick. And when he does, it's very dramatic, it's terrifying, and it's really brief. Same playbook over and over again. He's not going to end the civilization of Iran, like with nuclear weapons or whatever it is. He's not going to do that. He's not going to get rid of Harvard University and Columbia and Penn and all this stuff and MIT, as much as I wish he would. I wish there was a way for the federal government to tax them and to not subsidize them anymore, because I don't think they're good institutions for our country. But he's not going to even do that. He's not going to make abortion illegal nationally. He's not even going to empower ICE agents in sanctuary cities again. That's an interesting story. Why are the ICE agents in the streets? Because they don't have any collaboration in the prison system for an arrested person who might also be an illegal immigrant. So they're out in the streets. At the end of the day, it was a really bad look. 2 Americans got killed. Bad. What did Trump do? He pivoted. It's not going to do it again. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But the point is, that's not going to happen again. I live in New York City, right? Lots of immigrants in New York City. They don't all have papers. You don't see ICE stuff here. You see a lot of stickers in my super left-wing neighborhood about how to defend yourself from ICE. You're not seeing ICE in the streets. He learned his lesson. He's not going to do it. He talks big. He scares the crap out of his opponents and anybody listening. It's scary. It's legitimate scary. He makes a couple of big dramatic swoops. He's a big guy. He's like 6 foot something, big guy. He makes all these big whooping noises like a silverback gorilla, and then he gets what he wants. And then it's over. He did it to Hamas. He does it to Democrats. He does it to Republican members of Congress. He does it to Iran. He does it to Venezuela. He did it to Columbia University, and Columbia University sort of kind of folded, which is good. They shouldn't harbor anti-Semitism in their university. The point is that it's always the same playbook. Approximately 0% of the mainstream media understand this. You just look at the articles that they run. It's just endless. I got The Atlantic in my Facebook feed. I used to love The Atlantic. I stopped reading it. It's kind of absurd. I'm not going to read 50 articles about Trump ending the civilization of Iran. Let's analyze that, because it's just not, That's not the point, guys. Don't take it literally, but take it seriously. And guess what? China blinked, and now we have a ceasefire. Where that's going to go, if it's good or if it's bad, it's way too early to tell. It's not even been 24 hours. So we'll see. Other things you can figure out if you're politically untethered is that racial favoritism, which is what DEI is. I don't know why it's always obfuscated. They call it DEI, they called it affirmative action. These are kind of like positive words. Diversity, that's a really positive word in America. We're a very diverse country. It's great. Equity, great. Inclusion, awesome. Everybody wants to be at the cool table in the cafeteria. But it is racial favoritism at the end of the day. That's what it is. It actually begets racism. Racial favoritism doesn't end racism. It just promotes it. It just keeps it going. The people who talk about skin color the most are on the left, right? On the right, it's kind of not the discussion anymore, as far as I can tell. They're kind of over it, but it's on the left that they're obsessed with it. So there's a lot of liberal posturing, right? That gives coverage. You see it in the New York Times. You see it here at an NPR all the time. It's sort of, it's like cringy after a while. You obviously see it I watch a lot of streaming shows now that I don't have a life in the evenings. I can't say I blame my son, but it's one of the wonderful benefits of having a baby is that you go to bed early. You don't really go out at night. You just want to be home. And even when I don't have him, when it's not my week with him, when he's with his mother, I'm still going to go to bed early. So I watch a lot of streaming shows. It's always brave and noble and very insightful people of color on all the shows. Or there's the promotion of trans folk, in the wider discourse, liberal discourse, or Muslim immigrants, like Zohar Mamdani, Islamophobia. What is his takeaway from 9/11? Islamophobia is bad. I had a slightly different experience with 9/11. But at the end of the day, this posturing by liberals for the brave and noble people of color, it's very condescending to those people, I would imagine. It feels condescending. It certainly appears to me to be condescending. And it's duplicitous. It's like, guys, I get that liberals want to support underdogs, right? That's an American instinct. It's like the Bad News Bears, that old TV show, movie, I don't remember, something from the 70s, vaguely in my memory banks. Americans root for an underdog. So liberals tell themselves XYZ minority groups are underdogs, and they make up a new group, like the trans group. They'll just come up with groups. BIPOC, yep, let's call that a group. LGBTQIA plus, let's call that a group. What do the L, D, G's, B's, and the T's have in common with each other? Not a lot sometimes. The B's are obviously winning. Anybody who's bisexual, you figured it out, you've won. But in any event, they create these groups and they say they're underdogs. Well, when you say somebody's an underdog, what you're also saying is that you're the top dog. That's condescending. That's patronizing. That turns into racism like that. It's not a good way to navigate the world where you're like, let's just look out for the poor little people while I stride the planet like a giant monster. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't recommend living like that. So, and by the way, if you do think, obviously some people have it better off than others, but generally it's about money, and that's the real factor to keep an eye on. But even if you're poor and you're struggling, that doesn't relieve you of moral obligations, right? It's like, that's why it's so condescending. It's so crazy. So I talk about the Muslim thing a lot because I'm a Jew, and Muslims and Jews rub up against each other in the Middle East and here in this country. But when a Muslim immigrant attacker of the Temple Israel in Michigan, he's cast as in a compassionate light by the American liberal media, right? Okay, what does that do? Like, his brother was killed. His brother was in Hezbollah. Family members were killed. They were Shiites. They're in a war zone. I'm not going to blame the women. The men are doing the most of the killing, but the women, they got killed. It's bad, but they're Hezbollah terrorists. But it's still bad. I don't want the women and children to be killed, certainly. But when you cast him, this poor Muslim immigrant, so bereft that he wants to kill 150 Jewish children because that's like a normal response, right, to losing a family member 7,000 miles away. What you miss, what happens if the media creates that narrative is they miss what's rotten in the American Muslim community. The article should be like, and I'm going to, no, I don't want to swear. I try not to swear in the podcast. The article should be like, what the F is going on with the Michigan Arabs? Like, what's happening? This is crazy. We got to do something about this. Is it the Shias? Is it the Sunnis? Is it recent immigrants? Is it later immigrants? Is it people watching XYZ content on Instagram or Telegram? Like, what's going on? This is a freaking emergency because, like, you got to save the babies. And Jews are minorities, right? So you really got to save the minority babies. That's like the creed of core for liberals. But no, it's casting them as a compassionate in a compassionate light. But that doesn't do a good service to the Muslim community in Michigan either, right? Because they have problems. Clearly, I can't imagine your average Michigan Muslim guy is excited about this. They're like, holy crap. This is terrible for us. We don't want to have one of our guys doing stuff like this. This doesn't reflect well on them. And, it's the whole thing is a disaster for them. And how many others are in the community? Like, it's not, I can't, there's no way this is good for Michigan Muslim people. But the liberal narrative doesn't focus on that. And then obviously there's the whole security implications for everybody else. It's like, these people shouldn't have driver's licenses. They shouldn't have handguns, like Bondi Beach. Like, it's bad. We got to do something about it. But creating racial favoritism, where you create these narratives, so like, well, really, he's just really sad, so that's why he wanted to kill all these children. You're missing a lot, and you're harming a lot of people. This is a bit of a tongue twister, but tolerating intolerance only breeds more intolerance, right? If you're saying, oh, it's okay, you don't tolerate me, but I tolerate you, if you say that to somebody, that somebody's going to bring in his friend, and they're going to have a friend, and you're going to have a lot of intolerance. That's just what's happening with Muslim immigration in Australia and in Europe, right? That's why they're getting attacked all the time. In Paris, they didn't have Christmas market. Maybe it was somewhere else in France. I need to fact check that. But this past Christmas, but I believe it was Paris, they didn't have a Christmas market. Christmas markets are really fun. They have them in New York City too, in Union Square and Bryant Park. They're fun. They're festive. Everybody can enjoy a Christmas market. They're great. And it's cold. You get outside. They have lights strung up. It's a lot of fun. I'm sure they're really epic in Europe because, that's kind of the heartland of Christianity for a long time. They canceled it because they're worried about Islamic terrorism. So it's not working. Like, your tolerance for these immigrant groups doesn't work if they're not tolerant of you. So, diversity is a really great value. I live in when people say diversity, they always mean Black people. That's what they're saying. So I like living among Black people. I'm a white person. I come from a very white New England milieu. I love living around people of different backgrounds, but mostly that refers to Black people. I think it's great. I think it's a great life. It's a great value, and hopefully they feel the same thing about me. Diversity is a great value, but it only applies to people who celebrate diversity, right? Radical Muslims do not celebrate diversity, to put it mildly. So you can't have Muslim terrorists in your country. Even if you're a really nice person, you can't have them in here. It's bad. So, they say it's maybe Islamophobic or something to make these observations, but I have to save my skin. So call me whatever you want. Jews are very used to being insulted, right? It's much better to be insulted than to be murdered. So call me an Islamophobe. Just please don't kill me. That's all I ask for. Now, this same kind of thinking refers more directly to Black and Latino and Asian and whatever else is meant by a person of color. It's a very flexible term. We'll talk about it in a second. But it's racist to selectively promote people of color over people of non-color. Or it's bigoted, it's discriminatory to do that for women over men or for trans over non-trans, right? I think it's just kind of obvious that you shouldn't pick favorites based on people's genitals or melanin concentration when you're talking about like a pool of qualified people for a certain handful of slots and you have to make some hard decisions. I think it's just obvious that you shouldn't say, how do we decide between these candidates? Let's look at their genetics. I just don't think that's going to get you to a very good place in society, right? So, first of all, who is a person of color? Is it a fourth generation Chinese American? Is she the same thing as in the same category as a recently naturalized Haitian American man? What about a white, college educated woman who's an executive and a working class rural mom? Do they have a lot of similar interests, challenges, and goals? I mean, some maybe as women, but probably not a lot. So, where does that take us with equity and inclusion? How do you decide if a very wealthy, very dark-skinned person, like let's say a famous writer, I wasn't thinking Ta-Nehisi Coates, but just go with it. How, does he deserve more promotion at some cultural event than a very poor, very white writer with, let's say, an equally good book? How you can't answer these questions because these questions are retarded. So here's another thing that you realize when you're politically homeless and you're soaring through the airs with your superpowers. You realize that high expenses are a decision, right? It's not about geology. It's not about wind patterns. Unaffordability is caused by high prices. That's it. That's how it works. For some reason, this is like like a bizarre mind game. It's like the most complicated equation of the world, like out of Goodwill Hunting or something, with Matt Damon at those giant boards writing a gazillion equations. Like they're trying to crack, progressives, Democrats, liberals. They're trying to crack this whole unaffordability problem, which they call affordability, but it's really unaffordability. It's because of things are expensive. Why are things expensive? Because they cost too much. That's it. That's the whole thing. Why do they cost too much? Like normal stuff? Because politicians decided to add expenses to otherwise affordable items. You can even say it's not even politicians. You can just say college tuition. Like if you're a liberal arts student, you don't need an electron microscope or like SLAC, like the particle collider thing at Stanford. No, you need a room with a chair and a table and a book and a whiteboard, could even be a chalkboard, and a teacher. Those are the things you need. You don't need lots of fancy equipment. That hasn't changed for the past couple thousand years. That's pretty standard. Maybe the printing press, really, you could maybe date it to. This has been around for a long time. And so maybe 1,000 years. And why do tuitions go up so much, right? Because people decided to raise them. That's why they go up so much. But if you go into the political realm, politicians have added expenses to otherwise affordable things. I'm going to be in California next week. California has the highest gas prices in the country because they tax it more than anybody else. They also stop pumping it, which is a problem. And so they import it. It's not that they're using less, they're just importing it instead of producing their own oil, which they can do, but they tax it. That's all. In Westchester, New York, a really beautiful suburb north of me, costs more than the same housing in suburban Atlanta because local property taxes and a thicket of environmental and labor regulations prohibit new construction in Westchester, and it makes it more expensive to live there. These are decisions people are making. Meanwhile, more people move to Georgia than to New York. That's just how it is. Red states are cheaper because they make things cost less. Blue states are more expensive because they make things cost more. But wait, this gets so much better. Just hold on for the next part. State governments, or when Democrats are in charge at the federal level, they maintain and even subsidize high costs like Obamacare, insulates private insurance companies, right? They're much more protected now. We have ever consolidating healthcare networks. When I grew up, we used to have hospitals. Now we have healthcare networks. So there's less competition. Funny how that happened with Obamacare. That drives up prices really high because the government is letting them do it. If you take an Uber in New York City and then, which I haven't done it in so long, and you get the fee back to you, you get like the receipt, there's lines and lines and lines of surcharges. There's an MTA charge, there's a black car charge, there's now the congestion pricing charge, but even before congestion pricing in Manhattan, there's like 4 or 5 charges. And then Kathy Hochul, our governor, says things are not affordable. Well, yeah, because you added 5 different charges to an Uber ride. And the car insurance, the auto insurance is through the roof because of decisions they're making. And so that jacks up the base fare as well. So you're completely screwed. Uber now in New York City, Uber, Lyft, it's really only for wealthy people. It's very, very expensive in New York City. And I used to use them more liberally, but that's changed almost never. Almost never. Also, their decisions has been made to raise the fares on the MTA. So now it's $3 a ride. It's getting less and less competitive for other options, like for a gallon of gas or something like that if you own a car. These are decisions mostly made on the left. I know people are like, oh, why do you slag off the left so much? Well, because I live in a blue place and I see how expensive it is. Anything you think about, food, labor, infrastructure, entertainment, they're all prices have mushroomed, have spiked because of decisions, right? Democratic governments increase taxes, penalties, and fees. They don't reduce them. I'm from Massachusetts, lived in California, and now live in New York. These are the most highest tax states in the country. Why don't they reduce them? Well, because they say, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more, they say expenses, if you use expenses, you can fight for affordability, but it actually just makes it more expensive. So just track the cost of living in blue states. It just goes up like a hockey stick. Republicans in their states lower costs, they lower regulations, they reduce fees. Now, sometimes that leads to terrible things. Sprawl in Houston had these terrible, terrible Hurricane Harvey in 2017. It was awful, hundreds of billions of dollars in damage. But in general, things are just cheaper. And I'm sure some of the public services aren't as good. I don't know. I don't live in Florida. I don't live in North Carolina. I spent a little bit of time in South Carolina. Seemed okay to me, you know. It seemed like people weren't living in tent cities or something. People seemed fine. And it's way, way more realistic to get a house or an apartment in South Carolina than it is in New York, Massachusetts, or California, or New Jersey, or Connecticut. It's a long list, right? Affordability is a choice. That's all I'm trying to say. We're not talking about the weather. People are making decisions to make things expensive. It's not like a head scratcher what's going on. How do you solve it? Here's how you solve it. You break norms and you buck convention to solve deeply entrenched problems. That's how you do it. You don't do the same thing over and over and over again. You don't say, oh, I'm Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm just give me a little bit of extra money, and we'll give your money to some other person using some racial equity program or something, or poverty program. No, 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 no. You just stop doing that. But it takes balls, and you have to break things, and you have to be like a bull in a china shop, and you have to do Howard Dean. Bernie Sanders talked to it, and he has done some amendments. I looked it up. He's done some good work for affordability, never as legislation, always as amendments. But he walks the walk. But it's kind of small stuff compared to the rest of his party. So I don't think it really works for him because he's not technically not a member of the Democratic Party, but you get it. He caucuses with them. These are the way to do it is to break stuff. The only person breaking things is MAGA, right? That's the essence of MAGA. It's a bold departure. It has a lot of problems. There's a long list of errors and mistakes and dumb stuff, but it's working. They completely remade the Republican Party. There's no MAGA equivalent on the left, which I think is sad. I think we should have that. I don't know what it looked like. I don't know what the branding is, but MAGA is really clear. It's easy to understand, and it does stuff, and it's effective in achieving some of its goals. Immigration is down, right? The DEI is kind of out the window, hopefully forever. I don't think so. The left clings to it. They don't have any new thing to replace it, so they're still holding on to it, but it's less than it's been. The taxes are down at the federal level. These are really good things. Even at the state level, my taxes are going to go down because of SALT deductions, state and local tax deductions in New York. So there are things you can point to. You can't point to anything on the left that's reducing costs because they're increased costs. So I wrote an essay a long time ago, and I was kind of getting onto this a new way of thinking about MAGA Democrats. Like, I think you need to have MAGA Democrats. You need to have Democrats who are going to just break things. Is Rahm Emanuel that guy? I don't think so. I like him, but I don't think so. I think he's too out of touch. He's too old. He doesn't get it. And he's really smart. Maybe he does get it. Maybe he's not too old. Maybe we're similar age. Maybe he's like 10 years older than me or something. But um, hard to see him as such an establishment figure breaking the whole establishment. Trump didn't come from the Republican establishment. He was a Democrat. He came from it. He came from wealth, but not the political dynasties. So what Democrats do, since they don't have MAGA, is they complain and they blame and they castigate. The only people with ideas on the left are the progressives. Unfortunately, and I'm living in a city now dominated by progressive discourse, like from the newspapers and the media, and certainly from our mayor and from the city council and in the state assembly. I don't think it's fair to say Kathy Hochul is progressive. She's more of a centrist, but the state assembly is super progressive, and the state senate is progressive. So it's a very progressive state at the municipal and at the state level. They don't have ideas that seem to work very well. What they do is they want to add expenses to fight how expensive things are. So let me know how that works for you. The other problem that's part of this is that liberals won't evaluate conservative or alternative policies. They label everything else as fascist or racist or some insult. So they don't analyze those policies, right? They don't really analyze the tariffs. They just immediately are against them. They're immediately against, like, the war in Iran, which is a whole big other thing. They're just against. They don't analyze it anymore. They used to, maybe once upon a time. They don't analyze it. And guess what? If you don't analyze somebody else's policies, you're not going to analyze your own policies either. So this creates this governmental inertia that's responsible for really, really, really high costs. Yes, there was the Abundance book by a couple of smart, very left-wing writers, political writers and thinkers, Ezra Klein and the other guy whose name I can never remember, poor other guy from The Atlantic. But Ezra Klein's a very famous guy, very smart guy. And they have different ideas about it, but it's going to require something really different to get there. And they're not going to do it. The Democrats don't seem to be doing it. And that's why because they don't analyze critically their own policies. And that's why I think if Gavin Newsom does run, it's not clear if that's really going to happen because of his family. But if he does run for president 2028, he's going to have a really hard time because who wants to live in California? I love California, but more people are leaving California than moving to California because it's super expensive. Why is it super expensive? Because they decided to make things cost a lot. That's it. It's simple. Okay, last one. You've been very patient. Thank you for listening. Last lesson is don't listen, look around. I alluded to it earlier. Ignore the rhetoric. Just look at reality. Don't listen to politicians. Certainly don't follow the mainstream media. Do not listen to NPR or watch CNN. Just look around. See what's happening. The Democrats talk about affordability as an example. What are they doing about it? Have your short-term costs or your long-term costs decreased? What levers are Democrats using to lower tuition, to lower car insurance, to lower housing costs, to lower food costs? If they say they're lowering them, how long is it going to take? Funny observation. Are the people telling you about affordability very wealthy, like Zohran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, and even more wealthy, Gavin Newsom, or Rahm Emanuel, who's very like, I'm not saying wealthy people can't have good ideas. Donald Trump is a billionaire and he's like the champion of the working classes. I think that's more of an exception than the norm. But it's just kind of funny that these people are actually doing very well in life and they're marching all around about affordability, but it never seems to happen. It does get them elected. Likewise, Democrats say that Republicans and Trump specifically are anti-democratic. There was the giant No Kings rallies of I think just like a week and a half ago, 8 million people reportedly. It's not a lot of people out of 330 million, but it's a pretty good showing. They're saying there's fascism, there's authoritarianism, there's all these terrible things. Trump fired Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem. They're gone. Why did he do it? because they're unpopular. They're not doing things he wants, and they're not doing things, particularly Kristi Noem at DHS, that Americans wanted. I think it's very defensible for ICE to enforce immigration laws, but the way they were doing it was not popular. 2 Americans were killed. It's terrible. Kristi Noem's gone. She's out. It's over. So how does Trump's sensitivity to the electorate match Democratic claims that he's a dictator or wannabe dictator? I used to take them literally. Maybe I should only just take them seriously, right? But I'm not defending Trump. I'm not defending the cabinet members, but I'm just going to tell you, Trump watches a lot of TV and maybe follows some social media. I think he had somebody print it out for him, which is kind of hilarious. But the guy's 79, give him a break. He definitely wants to be popular, and he does things to try to be popular. He's highly adaptive to public sentiment. He pivots all the time, more so than any president in my lifetime. You do see the popular press talks about whiplash, right? Well, that's the epitome of democracy. You're not going to, so he's very responsive. You might not like what he's doing. I might not like what he's doing. I might think there's secret wisdom to it. You might think I'm full of it. Who knows? We'll find out over time. But he's certainly functioning like as a democracy should. Cabinet members go when they're out of favor for doing stuff Americans don't like. They don't want to see violence on their TV. At the end of the day, he gets rid of those people and he stopped. Those ICE stuff is not happening anymore. This is how it's supposed to function. You're not going to hear this or read about this in The Atlantic or on CNN or in a lecture hall in Princeton, but I'm telling you, this guy is highly responsive. He has antenna for the public that no president has had in my lifetime. Certainly nobody. Maybe a little bit Bill Clinton, maybe, but not like this. If you're a citizen and your vote is up for grabs, here's how it works. You don't substitute one ideology for another. Yes, I talk very favorably about Republicans because I think that they stack up a lot better right now against Democrats when it comes to affordability and some of these things, being against DEI, stuff like that. But who knows? That can change, right? If JD Vance becomes the party leader in a couple of years from now and he goes down some directions that he might be going down deeper, then I'm going to change, and I'm not going to say Republicans are favorable. But I know right now I skew that way in my analysis from living in a blue state. But don't substitute one ideology for another or one political brand for another. Try to transcend it, right? I don't mean to be talking down to you. I apologize for that. I'm thinking about it for myself. You have to be, so what are you loyal to? You're loyal to America. This is a project. This is a new country. We're trying to, 250 years old. We're trying to build it. We're trying to make it better. You trust yourself, right? You look around, you see stuff. You see people with mental illness cross-dressing. Maybe that's what it is. You just see it and you call it. Maybe it makes you unpopular. I don't know. You're an Islamophobe for noting that we've had up to 23 different Muslim attacks in this country since 9/11. You just say it, right? And far right-wing attacks too, obviously. That's happening too. You can say both, right? You ask questions, you trust yourself. Or, as the great George Clinton of Funkadelic said, free your mind and your ass will follow. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of the day.